lot of the criminals operate multi-jurisdictionally, and they try to capitalize on the breakdown of communication and information sharing between police jurisdictions. And because of that, it's when police departments operate in silos, they don't know what's happening in their municipality next to them or the surrounding. And that's one of the reasons for a call for a metro police department. But with our analytic model, we're very much on the cusp of becoming a big data repository. And as much as we are the City of Vancouver and we're a municipal police department, we are the leader in the province in terms of analytics because we are the driving force. I have Victoria Police, Saanich Police, all using our infrastructure and connecting in remotely through the internet, and every morning logging in and analyzing what's happening in Victoria, the capital region, North Island, on our system. Because there is no other options. There's no other niche market. We just took the leadership role in that and developed that capacity and tried to address these things. And by doing so, after we did it, and went, wow, this is really good, but we just shouldn't keep it to ourselves. Law enforcement typically is public sector money. We just keep doing what we do because we do it because the budget comes in, and the level of accountability and fiscal restraint and accounting for every dollar spent is becoming more and more ubiquitous with law enforcement. And part of that is we've had to, develop mechanisms to look at how we are delivering our core services to the public. Are we doing it as efficiently and as effectively as possible? And initially, I would say we weren't, but our management was being very progressive, and that's one thing. It's very interesting what's happened at the VPD because I've been in law enforcement going over 20 some odd years now, and I've worked in provincial police with the RCMP. VPD is kind of in a unique situation, what I call a perfect storm environment, because we have extremely progressive, well-educated senior managers, deputy chiefs and chiefs. Our Chief Chu has written books on the use of technology in law enforcement and creating organizational efficiencies. Not a lot of law enforcement senior management come in with that mindset and that kind of progressive moving towards change and accountability that we're seeing here. And as a result of that, the trickle effect from the people that he's brought up through the ranks and promoted as the deputy chiefs have similar mindsets. So that's changed our tone within the organization. So when we start moving towards analytics, there's a recognition that this is the right way to go because we get bang for our buck. We create greater efficiencies, a more effective organization. We can do more with less, and that addresses where the people that are responsible for oversight on our fiscal expenditures, they like to see that we are doing the best we can with as little resources as possible so that the public purse is being utilized as best as possible. And that's kind of where we're at with our kind of perfect storm with this. At the end of our core service review, we identified where we needed to address our deployment models, where we needed to increase shifting in certain areas, where we were falling short, and establish clear benchmarks and expectations on our delivery model, and then measure that on a consistent basis. And look, are we getting better, are we getting worse, or is it status quo? And set consistent annual reoccurring benchmarks where we have goals that by next year we will have reduced our response times by 2 minutes in the downtown core, for example. I'm working with ESRI, ISRI Canada, and not a subsidiary, but a partner company based out of Victoria called Latitude Geographics. Okay. And what we've been doing is expanding our GIS capacity. Currently, we have what's called GeoDash, where we can come in, an officer can come in the morning, click on what's happened in the last 24 hours in their area of responsibility, click, say they work in District 1, hit query. It will show where crimes are going up in the last 24 hours, so we can see other theft is spiking up, residential B&Es are on the uptake. Can window this out, shows a map, and as I zoom in, it shows the geographic disbursement of the crime. And we can look at where these offenses are taking place. So as an officer that's just come on shift, for example, who's been on a 4-day rotation, 4 days on, 4 days off, 12-hour shifts, they wouldn't know when they first show up on shift what's going on. Where should I be? You know, they're given an area of responsibility that they have to drive around. But now they know, okay, I got to be on the lookout because our break and enters are spiking within my neighborhood that I'm responsible for. I also have other thefts that are spiking up, and they're all happening in this area down here, which is, I know those business owners, maybe I should go visit them and talk to them. And they have this at their fingertips. Currently, every computer in the VPD, it's web interfaced. You log in, it's on our intranet. By virtue of logging into our intranet, you have that. The evolution of this, we're literally weeks away from deployment, is we're pushing this out to our mobile terminals in the police cruisers. So every officer driving around could query this, and we're moving from a 24-hour basis to 3 times a day updates, so they can see how crime is transitioning geographically throughout the day, and to see where they should be shifting their priorities and the resources. So if you have a sergeant in charge of a team, he can be on top of this in a very dynamic way and see where the issues are and allocate his resources accordingly to kind of get ahead of anything that might start to develop. So we're getting into that proactive model versus reactive, and then we can stop, say, a string of residential break and enters or a crime series, which you want to prevent that, where you have multiple victims. You have 1 or 2 of them popping up in the same geographic area, start saturating that area with officers, put surveillance teams in there, people, you know, officers in plain clothes watching the neighborhood, because that's where we know at between 3 and 5 o'clock, this is when the break-ins are happening on Tuesdays. Let's watch out for suspicious activity and try and interdict that activity. So that's one evolution of that. The third iteration of this is we're pushing this out to a public site. And the public site is, it's built on an HTML platform. So smartphones, you can pull it up. You enable your GPS on it, and it can tell you what crimes are happening within a 300 to 500 meter buffer of your immediate location. So if you're interested, if you're, for example, going to a movie downtown, and you're going to park your car, and you want to know where should I park my car, you pull up the VPD app and find out that there's been a string of theft from autos, break into autos, in this 4-block radius. You might want to rethink parking on that street and maybe go down another 6 blocks, or maybe not use that underground parking lot, because it's been it's a string of theft from autos have been taking place in the last 24 to 48 hours. Part of that evolution is we're setting up an alerting mechanism, so the public can provide us their emails, tell us what they're interested in knowing, and the system will automatically generate an alert, email them, and then with a hyperlink. So for example, if your child is going to Lord Strathcona and you're interested in any offense, sexual assaults happening within a 6 or 8 block radius, just so that you want to be sure that you want to keep your child aware of what's happening, and you as a parent, you want to be aware of any risks, you can set up a buffer around their school, or there are several buffers on their path home, and if anything happens within, you know, a 24-hour period, you get an immediate notification, click on the hyperlink, and it pulls you to the map, and it shows you what's been happening. And that has a direct, immediate interaction. And with that, the public can then interface directly with the VPD, so if they've seen something suspicious, they can then go to our online reporting and provide the police with that information in a very expeditious manner. It's very cutting edge, having that direct interaction with the public, providing them exactly what they need to know, as opposed to saturating them with information, and then allowing them to interact back with law enforcement. Change is difficult, and law enforcement is traditionally very tradition-based. And I have to say, as I mentioned, within the VPD, we have very progressive management team, and it just seems that because of that tone being set by our senior management, that the managers below have adopted that mindset. So we seem in a good position, but not every agency that I deal with has that, because some are scared of change. Change can be scary because we've been doing this for X amount of years. Why do we have to do something different? And you get pushback from that. So just marketing our availability of the crime system to other law enforcement agencies. Some were, wow, this is a great thing. You know, we appreciate the VPD offering up their infrastructure for other law enforcement, and it was completely done with altruistic intentions. It's for the greater good of the law enforcement. It's not about making, you know, we do not generate any revenue from this. It's a zero sum on it. The only money that we collect is to pay for the licensing. Everything else, it's offered in order to promote the greater good of law enforcement and catch bad guys and prevent crimes. We look at the evolution of how things have been going with law enforcement, with files that I worked on in the 1990s, serious organized crime files. You would put those together in a couple binders and it would go to court. Nowadays, a similar investigation with similar charges, the volumes of information and the legislative and legal requirements to move that case to charges and through the court system now would fill my room and then some. So you're dealing with millions of documents, you know, hundreds of millions of records, and when you're dealing with the database, linkages and cross relationships between tables and things of that nature. And it becomes very difficult to do a good job at investigating unless you're leveraging technology. You have to do it. And if you're not fully pushing the envelope on technology, getting that proverbial needle in a haystack becomes impossible because it's buried in massive volumes of data. Because as the technology revolution moves forward, the biggest challenge for law enforcement is not that we don't have enough information, it's that we're being saturated with so much information. And it's not humanly possible to go through that and sift through it. In the past, you would just have it in a file folder and you would have it in binders and you'd flip through it. Now you're dealing with hundreds of millions, in some cases billions of records. And you have to have technology in order to distill down to what are the core elements of the investigation, who are the core people, and what is the modus operandi, and what are the interrelationships that are taking place. And that is very technologically intensive, and you need specialists that can do that and can leverage the technology and produce those deliverables that can then further an investigation. 10 years ago, when we started major crime teams together under the major case management model, analysts were not part of that. Now I'm happy to say when we create a major case management team, within the top 3 positions, the team leader, the commander, and the analyst are usually the first 3 considerations when a project team is put together. Because with the right analyst that can really make the technology sing, will make or break the success of an investigation. And we've seen that time and time again. And that's why there's been such a success in the analytic program here, because it's not just smoke and mirrors. We have tangible results, and our management and people that are participating in the investigations, they see a net return. They see greater successes. For example, a recent one that was in the news, Sharma. He was an offender that was lived in Surrey and was moving into Vancouver to solicit his victims. So he'd be moving from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, lives elsewhere, and after obtaining his victims in the city of Vancouver, would then move to another municipality, Burnaby, to then commit his substantive offenses against the victims. So we have multi-jurisdictional offense taking place. Taking at each element of it, it's very difficult for a single municipality without the technology and the overlap and looking what's happening cross-jurisdictionally to investigate that effectively. In the case of Sharma, our sex crimes analyst was able to identify a number of victims and find the cross linkages between the victims and where the offenses were taking place to where they were being picked up to where the offender was living, and that triangle of moving between jurisdictional boundaries and connect the dots on that. And you know, I'm confident in saying that without the technology and without a highly motivated, highly trained analyst that could leverage the technology, I'm not sure those cases can be solved. There's been several key changes in the policing landscape that I've witnessed over the last couple years. First and foremost, many law enforcement agencies are moving towards an intelligence-led policing model. They're adopting that as their service delivery model. And what that means is it incorporates using analytics to get ahead of issues, identifying them in advance, providing management with actionable reports and intelligence reports that then can result in significant reductions in addressing crime problem areas or implementing strategies with an immediate net effect. But the driving force behind that is analytics and the ability to data mine and examine data warehouse repositories in order to identify where those issues are ahead of the curve. So from the Vancouver PD perspective, we've adopted an intelligence-led policing model, and we run CompStat at the Vancouver Police every 28 days. We run CompStat inspections, which create a higher degree of accountability from senior management right down to the patrol officer, and that accountability is on every aspect and every facet of the organization. But integral to that is an ability to know what's happening in a very timely manner. In the past, being able to find out what's happening on a 28-day cycle would be technologically prohibitive. With the evolution of technology and the advent of data warehouses, that's now become a reality. So for example, I mentioned our mapping capacity, where we have that updated every 24 hours, where we can see where crime is evolving, and that's shortly going to be shifted to 3 times a day updates available to patrol members. This is all being fed from a central data warehouse. Now, VPD pioneered the creation of this data warehouse where we collect all the police records, police reports, and police intelligence files from the entire province of British Columbia. We're in the enviable position of being one of the few police departments I know of globally that has the capacity to pull in and that massive volume of data, centrally house it, and then strap on analytic modules that allows you to data mine and drill down into the information to find those relationships, those causal linkages, and figure out where the trends are moving and developing. After looking at some of the shortcomings in law enforcement and sharing multi-jurisdictional information, we then offered up this analytic capacity at a provincial level to every municipal police department in the province. We call our system CRIME, the Consolidated Records Intelligence Mining Environment, and currently almost every municipal police department in the metro region is on it, as well as on the capital region in Victoria. I have Victoria Police, Saanich Police, and it's growing exponentially as we start signing on more municipal agencies. And it's simply they're allowed to connect into the infrastructure and do province-wide analysis. So they can either look at their own area of responsibility, tap into the IBM software that is the core backend to the data mining capacity, such as I2, Cognos tools, those sorts of things that allow you to actually drill into the information and find those trends and find those interrelationships. And it empowers those organizations to conduct their own analysis at a multi-jurisdictional level. And this concept has really taken off. It's a novel concept because traditionally law enforcement's been very siloed, very insular, and there's been a lot of barriers, a lot of systemic barriers to information sharing and exchanging. And I see the evolution in the province of British Columbia. We've been making leaps and strides in addressing that. And the crime system is one of those driving forces that helps facilitate information sharing, exchanging, and cross-collaboration on investigations at a multi-jurisdictional. There's no hiding of information and coveting information and siloing it. It's all pushed out to everyone to conduct their own independent analysis and look at the greater issues.